It's New Year's Eve, and that means it's time for some resolutions.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Tuesday, December 31st, 2024. Happy New Year's Eve to everybody. Hope you got some great, fun, safe, smart plans for tonight. Man, get a nap in. Good luck staying up to midnight. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen or watch. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and of course our great Locked On Tar Heels insiders. Man, it's great to be together. Here's what we're doing on the show today. Since tomorrow, I would typically do our resolution show tomorrow, but tomorrow's game day for Louisville, and so I want to make that more about that preview. So we're going to do resolutions today. What's nice is that Coach Davis kind of set us up for this with his post-game comments on Sunday night after the Campbell game. He said, quote, "I'm not moving off of what I've said with this team from the beginning. Success or lack of success is tied to two things, defense and rebounding. For this team to reach its full potential, we would have to be a really good defensive and rebounding team. I've been straightforward and direct with them from the start. I've also added one extra thing, and that's taking care of the basketball." So, how is Carolina doing in those three things? They can score, but can they defend? Can they rebound? And can they take care of the ball? We're going to explore that as we make New Year's resolutions today. But in the same way that Coach Davis added one to his own list, I'm adding one that we're going to start with coming up here in just a second. And oh, by the way, of course, anytime we do a show like this, I want to hear your New Year's resolutions, maybe both personally and for the Tar Heels. What are you going to try to do this 2025? I need to think about that myself. I haven't made any resolutions yet. Wow. And by the way, Trivia Tuesday, because it is Tuesday, is going to be actually in one of our resolutions. So stay tuned for that, and we'll do the answer right away with it. So segment one, right out of the gate, here is the resolution that's not part of Coach Davis's list that I'm bringing to you from my own special pretty noggin. Here's our resolution, and this one is team-wide. This one's not tied to a specific player. We resolve to start every game with our hair on fire. You all know it as well as I do, that this has been a season of two halves. A lot of times we talk about a game being a tale of two halves. This has been a season that's been a tale of two halves. And we've known it. We've obviously, with our eyeballs, seen the deficits Carolina has gotten into in the first half and how they've worked their way back in the second half of basketball games. But what I realized I had never done is gone back and looked at all the actual data beyond just like point differential, beyond scoring differential. And so I went through and made a chart with a whole bunch of different first half versus second half stats. It's broken down by game and has totals. By the way, if you'd like to see that, it's a great time to remind you about our Locked On Tar Heels Insider program, where anytime I make stats or charts like this, I post it in we have a special Google Drive that's just for the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders. So if you want to see all this data, you can join Locked On Tar Heels Insiders and see it there. That link is in the show notes. So let's get into these differentials, y'all, because it is crazy, crazy, crazy. First resolution, first half versus second half. We resolved to start every game with our hair on fire. Points scored total in the first half this season for Carolina, 485. Second half, 631. That is a big old fat discrepancy. 631 minus 485 is 146 more points in the second half for Carolina so far this season. It's pretty balanced in terms of points allowed between the two halves. Carolina has allowed 507 points in the first half, 513 points in the second. So that's basically a wash. Clearly the difference is in what Carolina is doing, not necessarily the difference in their defense from one half to the next. How about this, though? You look at point differential from what, like, first half, what Carolina scores versus what their opponent scored, and the same in the second half. In the first half, season long, Carolina is minus 22 in the first half. What? Yeah. That's crazy. But in the second half, it's even crazier. Carolina is plus 118 in total in the second halves of the 13 games they've played this season. And it plays itself out. Let me just give you like the shooting percentages and turnover numbers. Obviously, we could get into more detail, but I want to get on to our other resolutions as well. How about field goal percentage? First half, 42.6. Second half, 52.8. So it jumps a full 10 percentage points in the second half. 2-point field goals. So broken down from all field goals to 2-point field goals. First half, 52.8%. Isn't that funny? Their first half 2-point field goal percentage is the same as their second half all field goal percentage. So 2-point field goal percentage, first half 52.8, second half 62.4. Carolina is figuring out how to get it done in the second half. How about, and again, that's like a 10 percentage point jump from first to second half. 3-point shooting. First half, 26.1%. Second half, 37.1%. So that's an 11 percentage points jump from first to second half in 3-point shooting. And 26.1, by the way, is miserable from beyond the arc. Turnovers. Carolina cuts down on turnovers in the second half. First half, they've committed 86 total turnovers. Second half, they've committed 57 total turnovers. And let's break down what that is per game. That's in the first half. Carolina's committing 6.6 first half turnovers and committing 4.4 second half turnovers. So really, really cutting down on that. And again, we could go into even more numbers. I just want you to see what it's doing, right? Like what is contributing to the discrepancy in points from first to second half. Carolina has to do better in the first half as we get into conference play. All right. New Year's resolution for the Tar Heels, number 2. This one's also team-wide. The others we'll give to certain specific players. Resolution number 2. We resolve to defend with a new level of intensity and intentionality in 2025. And look, this is a big part of the issue is, yes, you don't have a shot blocker. I know that. I hear it. We talked about it all off season long. I get it, and it's fine, whatever. But there are multiple ways to defend. You can get steals. You can do early work. You can front the post. You can switch defense. All of this stuff can allow you to have a successful defense, even if you don't have a shot blocker. Like that, to me, is not a valid excuse for not being at least a solid defensive team. Let me give you some numbers here as well. Raw points per game is allowed. Let's compare it to what Carolina did last year. Last year, points allowed. Carolina was allowing, or at the end of the season, Carolina allowed 70.5 points per game. That was 125th in the nation. So not elite, but strong. Strong. This year, Carolina is allowing 79.4 points per game. Almost, that's like 9 percentage points higher, more points a game. That's 337th in the nation in points allowed per game, which is, there are 364 teams in Division I. That's really, really low. How about opponents scoring? Just like that was the average. Listen to this. Last year, Carolina allowed 90 or more points one time all season long. That was to Tennessee in the ACC SEC Challenge where the Tar Heels scored 100. This year, in just 13 games, Carolina has already allowed 90 plus points 5 times, all to, big time teams: Michigan State, Alabama, Kansas, Dayton, and Florida. Last year, Carolina allowed 85 or more points 5 times all season. They've already allowed 85 or more points 6 times this season. And you just keep looking at this. It gets crazier and crazier. This year, for example, Carolina has only held 4 of their 13 opponents under 70. Last year, season long, 18 total opponents under 70. And I know it's like, you got a lot more games to do that, but I don't see Carolina getting there. Last year, Carolina held 6 opponents under 60 points. This year, just once so far. Again, they could get there. They could get it figured out, but nothing is telling me that they're going to. Carolina, the craziest one to me is the 90 plus points scored. Just once all time last year, 5 times already this year. And I'm willing to bet that there are going to be more teams score 90 on Carolina. It's going to be a track meet, and the Tar Heels are going to have to keep scoring a ton of points. As you look at Ken Pom adjusted defense, remember, Carolina was so good defensively last year. That's a big part of what made them so strong as a team. They finished the season 8th in adjusted defensive efficiency at Ken Pom. This year, they're sitting at 58th. They can grow. They can get better. But when you're this far into a season to get like 50 spots better, no, that's not happening. There's a big, wide chasm from where Carolina was last year, to where they are this year. Another way we could look at this is points per possession. And the goal is offensively, you want to score over 1 point per possession, and defensively, you want to hold your opponent under 1 point per possession. And every 10th of a point above and below that is pretty big gap. Like, it's not just like, oh, you went from 1 to 1.1. That's not much. No, that's a big deal. So last year, Carolina allowed 20 opponents to score over 1 point per possession for an entire game. This year, in just 13 games, Carolina has already allowed 10 opponents to get over 1 point per possession. So probably going to blow right by that 20. That's tough. Now, thankfully, Carolina's offensive points per possession is higher than last year, but not by much. And the defense points per possession allowed is much worse, as you would imagine, based on all the other numbers I've given you. So let me also then give an addendum to, we resolve to defend with a new level of intensity and intentionality in 2025. My addendum is to the coaching staff. We resolve to try out more defensive wrinkles in 2025, right? Like, how often have we said, Carolina could throw a lot of different stuff at these teams that would probably suit their personnel, whether it's more press, more traps, more zone looks. It doesn't have to be all the time, but just throw in the wrinkle to keep opponents guessing and slow them down. You could try defending the post differently. All these options. I would like to see that. That is what, I talked in a recent show about not blaming Coach Davis for the slow starts. This is an area where I would put blame on the coaching staff for, like, it can't get worse. So let's try stuff. If it's not working, you put it back away. But man, I would just love to see that happen. All right. We got more of our resolutions coming up. And the next one has to do with rebounding, a staple of Carolina basketball. How are things going? Let's just tell you that a guard is leading the Tar Heels in rebounding. I'll get to that resolution coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions maybe you forgot about, or maybe that you were paying for more than once? That's definitely happened to people I know who they had a few subscriptions they didn't even realize they were still paying for, but Rocket Money made it really easy for them to track it down. It's kind of like having a personal finance assistant, but that's like digital, right? How cool is that? And that's what Rocket Money is, a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your subscriptions, but also it's not just that. Monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. It even brings together everything in one place. So whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you have for 2025, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members just like you up to $740 when you utilize all of the various premium features the app has to offer. So, utilize Rocket Money, cancel your unwanted subscriptions, and reach your financial goals faster this year. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. Again, that's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, we're doing New Year's resolutions for the Tar Heels here on New Year's Eve. As I said, we've already talked about Carolina's first half versus second half starts. We've looked at defense, which is one of the 3 things that Coach Davis talked about post-game Campbell that he's really looking at. One of the others was rebounding. So my next New Year's resolution for the Tar Heels is this. I want one of the Jae'lyns, Withers or Washington, to say this. I resolve to lead Carolina in rebounding. Why do I have to say that? Because neither of them are. Nor, by the way, is any other front court player. The North Carolina Tar Heels are led in rebounding by none other than 6'3" Seth Trimble. And oh, by the way, Seth is averaging 4.83 rebounds a game to lead the team. That's right. North Carolina's leading rebounder is averaging fewer than 5 rebounds a game. That is absurd, and it is unheard of. I'll tell you why in just a little bit. Here are the top 3 Tar Heels in rebounds per game. Seth Trimble at 4.83, Jalen Washington at 4.769, and then Jalen Withers at 4.6. Now, both Jalen's have more total rebounds than does Seth, but keep in mind, Seth didn't play in the Campbell game. And prior to the Campbell game, not only was he leading the Tar Heels in rebounding average, he was leading the Tar Heels in total rebounds. Before Campbell, Seth Trimble 58, Jalen Washington 57, Jalen Withers 53. What? You've got to be kidding me. I am not. That is the truth. Now, that speaks a lot to Seth and what a phenomenal rebounding guard he is at 6'3", playing the 3 position where he's routinely outsized. Really, really good stuff from him to get his nose in there and help do that. But it's also a referendum on Carolina's front court and the rebounding that they're not doing. Now, let's also be fair about this. Those stats in terms of total rebounds and rebounds per game are not necessarily a measurement of who's doing the best when they're in and playing, because Seth is getting a lot more minutes than any of the front court guys because Carolina is just rotating through them, trying to find the best combination they can. So perhaps a better way to look at it is rebounding percentage, which is in a pretty close estimation of when you're in a game, what percentage of available rebounds you get. So there's offensive rebounding percentage, defensive rebounding percentage, and total rebounding percentage. So basically, let's say while you're playing, while you're on the floor, there are 20 available rebounds and you get 5 of them. That means your total rebounding percentage would be 25%. Does that make sense? There you go. So Carolina is led in rebounding percentage by Ty Claude, 19.6%. James Brown is second at 15.9%. Then Jalen Washington, 15.8. Van Allen Lubin, 14.6. Jalen Withers, 14.2. And then we drop off to Drake Powell at 8.6 and Seth Trimble at 8.3. So Seth, when you look at rebounding percentage, Seth is much further down, 7th on the team in that regard. And I think that speaks more to what's going on there. But with some of these other big guys, Ty Claude, James Brown, for example, although they have the 2 highest rebounding percentages on the team, they're not in the game enough for that to make enough of a difference. So that means, to me, that it's the Jaelens that really have to step up. And I would say Van Allen Lubin as well, but the Jaelens are both bigger and a little more athletic than he is. And so I'm putting this on them to step up. Also as guys that have been around in this program longer. So again, some of this is based on opportunity, right? Rebounds per game does not the full story tell. All the same, I don't care about opportunity and lack thereof. There is no reason that Seth Trimble should be leading this team in rebounding. Nor should there be any reason that the leading rebounder for the North Carolina Tar Heels is averaging 4.83 rebounds per game. Now, I do appreciate that Carolina is doing a better job rebounding by committee, but still the rebounding margin is not where it should be either. And so it's not like Carolina is spreading it around so much and they're blowing other teams away on the glass. No, that's not happening. Let me give you some frame of reference for when Carolina has been doing what they typically do. Armando Bacot, career rebounding percentage is 19.5. So right like with what Ty Claude is doing right now. But keep in mind, Armando is doing that playing like 30 some minutes a game. So much more difficult to get that. His single season high was 22.6% rebounding percentage in the 21-22 season when Carolina went to the national championship game. Here's the other thing that's crazy. Let's say that Seth Trimble's number holds or Jalen Washington takes over and still sits at like that 4.8, 4.9 range. If something doesn't change drastically, whoever leads Carolina in rebounding this year, it will be the lowest leading rebounding average in Carolina history. Carolina has never been led in rebounding by someone averaging under 5 rebounds per game. And that data goes back to the 51-52 season, by the way, in the Carolina record book. And only three times in Carolina history has Carolina's leading rebounder averaged under 7 rebounds a game. So it's not just like, oh, there's been a bunch of guys that were like 5.5 or 6.1 or 5.8. It's just that nobody's been under 5. No. Literally 3 times in the history of North Carolina basketball has a Tar Heel led Carolina in rebounding with an average under 7. That was James Michael McAdoo in the 2012-13 season at 6.8, Micah Corrin in 77-78 with 6.7, and then Jawad Williams back in 02-03 with 5.6. So that's what we're talking about here. What's happening right now with Carolina's rebounding is literally unprecedented in the entire wildly impressive Carolina rebounding history. That's what we're saying here. And team-wide, here's what I'm talking about as well. Carolina's rebounding margin, usually is among the NCAA leaders, at least in the Roy Williams era. But even in the Hubert Davis era, Carolina has had a positive rebounding margin. The past 3 seasons, the first 3 seasons of Hubert Davis era have been plus 0.854, plus 5.33, and plus 7.27. Also, for reference, Coach Williams last year, the Tar Heels were plus 10.31 in rebounding margin. This year, it is on the plus side, but it's 0.83. Carolina out rebounds their opponents. It's less than like a rebound a game. The total is 502 to 468. That's crazy. That is, to Coach Davis's point, that's not Carolina basketball. Carolina has already been out rebounded 4 times this season. To put that in context, the entirety of last season, they were out rebounded just 5 times. Coach Davis's first season, the entire season, they were out rebounded just 3 times. So in the first 13 games of this season, the Tar Heels have been out rebounded more times than they were literally the entirety of Coach Davis's first season at the helm. So somebody has to do it. And I want to see the Jae'lyn step up, take ownership of this thing, and get those rebounds way, way, way up. All right, y'all, we got one more resolution to get to on today's show. And to go back to Coach Davis's point, this one has to do with turnovers. And Carolina took a nice step in the right direction on Sunday night with that. But there's still more to go to turn things around. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, our final and 4th resolution today for the Tar Heels, as we get ready to flip the calendar to 2025, I'm going to aim it specifically to Elliot Cadeau, but this one also is kind of a team-wide resolution as well. By the way, another reminder, I want to hear your resolution. Share those with me. Drop them in Locked On Tar Heels Discord. If you're an insider, text them to me. If you're on social media or something, DM me. Let's chat about it. All right, Elliot Cadeau resolution. I resolve to take better care of the basketball in 2025 by valuing every possession. I think that's what it is. Carolina is playing so much faster this year. 4th right now, and it's fluctuated back and forth some, but right now they're playing as the 4th fastest team in the nation in adjusted tempo at KenPom. And that makes it a little more difficult to value the basketball and to limit turnovers. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. There are things that we do every day that we just go about our business and it's like la-di-da-di-da, and you just forget to be as intentional and as purposeful about it as you should be. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Like as the game goes, as it wears on, it's easy to take a possession or 2 off here or there. But that's not what elite teams do. That's not even what good teams do. And if Carolina wants to get into that upper echelon, if they want to be consistent, then they have to mitigate turnovers. And part of that is because the defense, although hopefully they get better as they have our resolution, but the defense has not proven good enough or consistent enough to stop teams enough where Carolina can afford silly turnovers. And so they need to maximize as many offensive opportunities as they can. And so that means valuing the ball like crazy. That means, yes, you're going to turn the ball over some, particularly when it's somebody just makes a good play or you get an offensive turnover that's a bang call, something like that. But just throwing the ball away and missing teammates and doing stuff like that, That's the stuff that's going to drive the coaching staff crazy. That's the stuff that's going to drive us crazy, and the players as well. Right? Like, they get frustrated with that. But I think for me, this starts with Elliot, and of course, because he's your point guard, he's the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands the most. But let's look at this. I looked at games in which Elliot Cadeau has 4 or more turnovers. Last season, his freshman year, had 5 such games all of last season, and he never had more than 5 turnovers. Had 3 games with 4, 2 games with 5. 5 total games all of last season, 37 games in which Elliot had 4 or more turnovers. This season, he has already surpassed that number. In the first 13 games of the season, Elliot Cadeau has 6 games with 4 or more turnovers, including a 5, a 6, and a 7. So already his 2 highest turnover games of his career this season, a game with 6 and a game with 7. His turnover per game average has fluctuated wildly as well. The first 4 games of the season, when Carolina was doing well as a team with turnovers, Elliot was averaging 1.75 turnovers a game. In the 8 games after that, it ballooned exponentially to 4.13 turnovers per game. Now, a much better showing against Campbell on Tuesday night, and that is what we're looking for. That is the Elliot Cadeau we need to go along with the scoring and the rim attacking he had as well in that game. Elliot did have 3 turnovers. Okay, that's a lot, but 12 assists, and that gives you a 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, and you can live with that every day of the week, especially because Carolina only had 4 other turnovers, just 7 in the game as a team. Now, obviously, one game does not a new leaf turnover. But hopefully this Campbell game is a jump start for Elliot into 2025, putting him right back in the right direction of what we all know he can be, right? Like, I think it's some kind of funk. Remember, Adam Lucas had talked about in one of his articles that Elliot had been sick for a time, right? Like, is that some factor in this? Hopefully so. And what we saw Sunday night against Campbell is the Elliot Cadeau that we get season long. That's what we're looking for. But again, it's not just Elliot. Yes, I pointed my resolution to him, but as a team, Carolina in those first 4 games of the season averaged 7.75 turnovers as a team. That's phenomenal. I don't care how fast or how slow you're playing. That is a great, great number. But in the 8 games after that, when Elliot's average jumped, the whole team's average jumped from 7.75 to 13.25 turnovers a game. That's just simply too many. But then against Campbell, as a team, as I just said, Carolina back to only 7 turnovers in that game. Same about Elliot. That's not necessarily turning a corner. It's not a trend. It's not a pattern yet, but it is a step in the right direction for the Tar Heels. Now it's time to go build on that in ACC play. But some of the issues are Carolina has 2 games this season with 18 turnovers. The most turnovers Carolina has ever had in the Hubert Davis era is 21. That was in overtime against Baylor in the second round of the 2022 NCAA tournament. So you had 5 extra minutes in that game. Sure, still too many turnovers, but you remember how that second half went. Baylor was just going crazy. Carolina lost their minds and whatever. But other than that, 18 is the second highest turnover total in a single game in the Hubert Davis era. They've done it now 4 times, twice this season. One of them was against UNC Asheville kind of randomly, and the other was the 4 overtime game against Alabama at PK 85. So that's a game when you literally play another half of basketball, 20 more minutes. So yeah, you're going to get 18 turnovers in that. So Carolina doing that twice this season already is just simply too much. And I get it. I hear it. In a year where you're playing faster, you're going to have more turnovers. But it can't be consistently like this. The percentage has to come down, and that's what matters more so than this raw total that we're looking at. And Carolina is in a good spot with that. But again, it needs to come down for Carolina to be successful because of how they have to play this year. That's the crux of this thing. So when we go from raw numbers to turnover percentage, that's where you really start to see more of this. Several players are down, but several players are up from where they were last year. Last year, Elliot Cadeau, one of the things I had talked about coming into this season is Carolina has a whole bunch of players with the low turnover percentage, meaning that Carolina truly, this could be the lowest turnover percentage team the Tar Heels have ever had. They've in fact set that mark back-to-back seasons. No reason they couldn't do it again. But a big part of it was that Elliot Cadeau had to come way down on his turnover percentage, where he was up at 19% last year. It's the same thing as total rebounding percentage, right? Like how many of all possessions, how many of those are you turning the ball over? Elliot, 19% last year. This year, it's up to 23.9. That's the wrong direction. Elliot, I'd like to see him. I mean, obviously, the lower the better, but I feel like 12 to 15% is a legitimate number he could or should be at. 23%, that's almost turning the ball over on 1 out of every 4 possessions. That ain't it, man. The biggest jump, the biggest culprit this year, though, has been Jalen Washington, who last year had a turnover percentage of 12.6. That's up 6 percentage points to 18.6 this year. That ain't going to do it. There's a couple others that are up, but they're very small. Van Allen Lubin was 9.9 last year at Vandy. He's up to 12.0%. And RJ up 1 percentage point from 7.4 to 8.5. So, okay, sure, whatever. The encouraging thing is that there's several guys that are actually down this year. One of them is somebody that frightened me the most last year. That was Jalen Withers, 16.4% turnover percentage last year. It's down to 13.9%. Not much, but it is less. Now, I know he's not playing a ton of minutes right now, but whatever. Ty Claude is having the lowest turnover percentage of his career, 11.3%, down from 15.3 last year. Seth Trimble, this is really important, is down from 11.9% last year to single digits, 9.9% this year. That's really important because he's handling the ball a lot more and he's playing a lot more minutes. So for Seth to come down, bravo. That is so big time for Seth Trimble. Cade Tyson has cut his almost in half, and he already had a low turnover percentage. His freshman year at Belmont was like 10.2, something like that. Last year, 10.0 turnover percentage. He's down to 5.8 turnover percentage this year. So say what you will about Cade Tyson and his shooting, and we have, but his turnover percentage, he's not hurting the team that way. I'll tell you that much right now. That's really impressive. Another really impressive number to me is Ian Jackson, whose turnover percentage, and keep in mind, this is a freshman that's handling the ball a ton and growing more and more all the time. His turnover percentage, Ian Jackson, just 7.2%. Wildly impressive. So to me, the key culprits here are Elliot and Jalen Washington. You guys got to get those turnover percentages down, value and take care of the ball. And we can do that. Like, this is possible. Carolina can do that, but they've got to get there. All right, y'all. Oh, I told you we were going to do Tuesday trivia, and I just kind of blew right through it. But it was, what were the 3 lowest rebounding averages to lead Carolina in rebounding in Carolina history? I'm so sorry we blew right by it. But right again, Jawad Williams, Micah Corrin, James Michael McAdoo were those at 5'6", 6'7", and 6'8". Crazy how low those rebounding averages were. This could be a new all-time low for Carolina. Happy New Year's Eve to all of you. I kind of joked about it early on, but very seriously, please be wise. Please be smart tonight. There are a lot of crazy people out there on the roads and doing stuff, man. Just be smart, right? If you have had some drinks, please make sure you call somebody. But keep in mind, there are a lot of people going to be out on the road who maybe aren't making wise choices. Just be smart. That's all I ask of you. All right, guys, we'll be right back together tomorrow on New Year's Day to preview the Louisville game that's coming up Wednesday evening as Carolina gets back into the main course of ACC action. Going to be crazy, but this is it, man. This is where it's got to come together. No more non-con, man. It's real. So real. All right, y'all. Can't wait to talk to then. If you haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube, please make sure you do so. If you prefer to listen to the show, subscribe there, but also subscribe on YouTube to help us get 10,000 subscribers in 3 years. If you haven't joined the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders, we plugged that earlier. The link's in the show notes. Great way to help support the show and go so much deeper and have access to all of these data points that we've talked about today. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, we'd love to have you there as well. That link is also in the show notes. Always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, and then we'll recap the game afterwards live. Make sure you join us on YouTube. But until then, peace.